Nobody told me about Ghost Month before I got to Vietnam. That's the thing I keep coming back to. I'd done the research any reasonably prepared traveler does: visa requirements, weather, which areas to visit, in which order. I'd read 3 guidebooks. Not one of them mentioned that the 7th month of the lunar calendar, which overlapped with my entire time in the country, was considered the month when the gates of the underworld open and the dead are free to wander among the living. If someone had told me that before I arrived, I would have found it interesting in the way you find folklore interesting, something to file alongside the street food tips and the currency exchange rate. I would not have taken it seriously. I'm telling you this so you understand the position I was in when things started happening. I wasn't primed for it. I wasn't in a suggestible state. I was a 31-year-old graphic designer from Denver who thought he had a handle on his 2-week Vietnam itinerary and had booked a nice guest house in Hoi An's old quarter for 5 nights. My name is Marcus, and I want to tell you about the 3rd night. The first 2 nights were fine. Great, actually. Hoi An at night is genuinely beautiful. The lanterns over the river, the old yellow buildings, the way the whole town softens in the evening like something out of a painting. I'd eaten well, slept well, felt that particular contentment of someone exactly where they wanted to be. The 3rd evening, I noticed something had changed on the street outside my guest house. There were offerings on the sidewalk, not at a temple, not at a designated shrine. Just on the pavement in front of almost every building on the block, small arrangements of food and incense and paper money, little fires burning in metal bins. The smoke was thick and sweet. People moved around these arrangements carefully, deliberately, never stepping over them. I asked my guest house owner about it, a man in his 50s named Bin who spoke good English. He explained it simply, calmly, the way you explain something so embedded in daily life that it barely needs explaining. He said this was Ghost Month, the month when wandering spirits, the ones with no family to tend to them, were given offerings so they would not cause trouble. The fires were to send the paper, money, and food to the other side. The important thing, he said, and he said this in the same mild tone as everything else, was not to be outside alone after midnight. The hungry ghosts were most active then, and they were drawn to the living. I said, okay. I thanked him. I went up to my room. I want to be clear about what I thought at that point. I thought it was a beautiful tradition. I thought it was culturally significant and worth learning about. I thought I would read more about it. What I did not think, not for 1 second, was that I needed to adjust my behavior in any way. That night, I stayed out late. Not past midnight, closer to 11, just wandering the old town the way I'd been doing every night. The streets were quieter than usual. Not empty. There were other tourists around, but the locals who normally filled the sidewalks and the plastic stool restaurants had thinned out considerably. The offering fires were still burning on the pavement. The smoke drifted through the alleys. At some point, walking back to the guest house, I passed a small shrine set into the wall of an old building. A little alcove with a figure inside it, joss sticks burning, a bowl of fruit, normal enough. But hanging above the shrine's opening were strips of red paper with writing on them, and tied to the wall on either side were what looked like small bundles of dried leaves and herbs. And standing in front of the shrine, facing it, was a woman. Nothing unusual about that. People pray at shrines all the time. But something made me slow down as I passed. She was very still. And as I went by, I glanced at her face and profile. Just a quick sideways look, and what I saw made me take one more step before my legs stopped working for a second. Her eyes were open, completely open, staring at the shrine, and they were not blinking. Not in the way of someone deep in concentration. Not in the way of someone whose blink I'd simply missed. The kind of not blinking that registers as wrong at a cellular level, that your body flags before your brain catches up. The same alarm system that used to keep your ancestors alive. I kept walking, faster than before. I got back to my guest house. I went up to my room. I locked the door, which I hadn't been doing, and I sat on the edge of the bed and told myself I was overtired and over-imaginative and that the woman at the shrine had simply been praying with her eyes open, which people do. My room was on the 2nd floor facing the street. The window was open because the night air in August in Hoi An is warm and heavy and you leave windows open. From where I sat, I could hear the street below, quiet now, mostly just the occasional motorbike. And then I smelled it. Incense. The same heavy, sweet smell from the offering fires, coming from inside my room. The window was open. Incense smoke from the street could drift in. I knew that. I told myself that. But the smell was not drifting, not dispersed the way outside air disperses when it enters a room. It was concentrated, localized, the way a smell is when its source is in the room with you. I sat very still, and the smell was there, and every hair on my arms was standing up, and I was not breathing properly. These shallow, careful breaths, like I was trying to take up as little space in the air as possible. The room felt full in a way it hadn't felt a minute ago, not visually, nothing I could point to. Just the sense, the absolute sense that the space around me was occupied. I turned on every light in the room. The overhead, the bedside lamp, the bathroom light, I left them all on. The smell faded over maybe 5 minutes. Slowly, like someone leaving a room. I did not sleep well that night. I kept waking up. Every time I woke, the first thing I did was check the lights, all still on, and the second thing was listen, and the third thing was breathe and wait for the smell to be back. It wasn't back. In the morning, I came downstairs and Bin was behind the desk. He looked at me and said, without me saying anything, that I didn't sleep well. I said no. He asked if I had been outside after midnight. I said no. I was back before 11. He nodded, slowly. Then he asked whether I had passed any of the shrines on the way home. I said yes. I described what I'd seen at the shrine, the woman, the open eyes. I asked who she was. Bin was quiet for a moment. Then he asked if she had been there when I passed on the way out earlier in the evening. I thought about it. I had passed that shrine on the way out. I hadn't noticed anyone there then. He nodded again. He said that during Ghost Month, the shrines were sometimes visited by things that were not people, that they used the offerings as anchor points, that it was not wise to look at them directly, and especially not wise to look at their faces. I stood at the bottom of the stairs and felt the skin on the back of my neck go tight and cold. I asked what would have happened if I had stopped. He looked at me for a moment. Then he said it was better not to stop, that things that were looked at directly during Ghost Month sometimes followed the person who looked, that they were hungry, and the living carried a warmth that the dead could find from a distance, and once they found it, they were reluctant to leave it. I checked out of that guest house the next morning. I told Bin it was a scheduling issue. I spent the rest of my time in Vietnam in brightly lit places, in busy restaurants, in tour groups. I did not walk alone at night. I did not look directly at any shrines. And on the plane home, flying out of Ho Chi Minh City at 2 a.m, when the cabin lights went down and most people around me were sleeping, I became aware of the smell again. Faint, sweet. The smell of incense in an enclosed space. I told myself it was the person in the seat behind me, someone who'd been near offering fires earlier that day. A perfectly reasonable explanation. I did not turn around to check. I kept my eyes forward for the entire 11-hour flight, and I left every light on above my seat until the sun came up. This story doesn't end in Japan. That's the first thing I need you to understand. Most stories like this end when the person gets on the plane home and leaves whatever happened behind them. This one didn't. What started at the base of Mount Fuji followed me back to Portland, and it's still there, and I don't know how to make it stop. My name is Diane. I'm 34. I'm telling this story now, 18 months after the trip, because a Buddhist priest in my own city told me last month that talking about it openly was the only thing left to try. So, here it is. I went to Japan with my best friend, Kira. 2 weeks in October, a trip we'd been planning for 2 years. Tokyo, Kyoto, Hakone, the Fuji 5 Lakes area. On our second to last day, driving the rental car around Lake Saiko, we passed a sign for Aokigahara. If you don't know Aokigahara, it's a forest at the base of Mount Fuji. Dense, old. The kind of forest where the trees grow so close together that the light changes completely once you step in, where lava rock under the soil disrupts compasses and phone signals. It's also known for something else. Japanese people know not to go there, or if they go, they know not to go in far, and they know not to take anything out. There are signs at the trailheads, ropes marking how far is safe. The forest has a weight to it. Every account I've read since says the same thing, a heaviness that has nothing to do with the trees. Neither Kira nor I knew any of this. We saw a sign for a nature trail, we had time to kill, and we pulled over. We didn't go in far. 15 minutes on the marked trail, maybe 20. It was beautiful, in the way that the forest was genuinely beautiful. The twisted volcanic rock under ancient trees, shafts of light coming through the canopy. Peaceful, even. That was the thing that surprised me most looking back. It felt peaceful. I felt nothing that day that I would call a warning. What I took from that forest, I did not take on purpose. Halfway along the trail, there was a small clearing where the trees opened up slightly. Off to the right, maybe 10 feet from the path, something was caught in the lower branches of a tree. A piece of fabric. Dark, weathered, the kind of thing that had been there long enough to look like it belonged. I didn't touch it. I photographed it from the path the way you photograph interesting things on trails and moved on. That's all I did. I took a photograph. The first thing happened 2 days after I got home to Portland. I woke up at 3 a.m. to the sound of my own name being said, not called out. Said, quietly, directly, the way you say someone's name when you're sitting next to them and want their attention. I sat up in bed and the room was empty and I told myself I'd been dreaming and I went back to sleep. The second thing happened 4 nights later. Same time, same thing. My name, said quietly from the empty room. This time I didn't go back to sleep easily. I lay there for 2 hours with the light on, which I never do, listening to my apartment. Neither Kira nor I knew any of this. We saw a sign for a nature trail, we had time to kill, and we pulled over. We didn't go in far. 15 minutes on the marked trail, maybe 20. It was beautiful, in the way that the forest was genuinely beautiful. The twisted volcanic rock under ancient trees, shafts of light coming through the canopy. Peaceful, even. That was the thing that surprised me most looking back. It felt peaceful. I felt nothing that day that I would call a warning. What I took from that forest, I did not take on purpose. Halfway along the trail, there was a small clearing where the trees opened up slightly. Off to the right, maybe 10 feet from the path, something was caught in the lower branches of a tree. A piece of fabric. Dark, weathered, the kind of thing that had been there long enough to look like it belonged. I didn't touch it. I photographed it from the path the way you photograph interesting things on trails and moved on. That's all I did. I took a photograph. The first thing happened 2 days after I got home to Portland. I woke up at 3 a.m. to the sound of my own name being said, not called out. Said, quietly, directly, the way you say someone's name when you're sitting next to them and want their attention. I sat up in bed and the room was empty and I told myself I'd been dreaming and I went back to sleep. The second thing happened 4 nights later. Same time, same thing. My name, said quietly from the empty room. This time I didn't go back to sleep easily. I lay there for 2 hours with the light on, which I never do, listening to my apartment. By the third time, which was a week after that, I had started to notice other things. My cat, Felix, had stopped sleeping in my bedroom. He'd slept at the foot of my bed every night for 6 years without exception. Within a week of me coming home from Japan, he started sleeping in the hallway with his back to my closed door, which he had never done. He would not come into the bedroom even during the day. If I picked him up and carried him in, he would scramble out immediately. I had started waking up exhausted no matter how long I slept. Not tired, exhausted. The kind where your body feels like it's been working all night, like you've been somewhere and come back and the trip has cost you something. I started losing weight without trying. I started having trouble concentrating at work. My doctor ran tests. Everything came back normal. Kira visited in December, 2 months after the trip. She noticed immediately that something was wrong and I told her everything. She was quiet for a while and then she told me something she hadn't mentioned before. On the drive away from Aokigahara, she said she had felt something change in the car. A weight, a presence. She'd assumed it was her imagination and hadn't said anything. She asked if I still had the photograph. I did. I pulled it up on my phone and we looked at it together, and I want to describe what we saw in that photo very carefully because I've looked at it hundreds of times since and it is the thing I cannot account for. The fabric in the tree was still there, central in the frame, but in the background, visible between 2 trees at the far edge of the clearing, there was a figure, standing perfectly still, facing the camera. Not a hiker, not a local, a shape that I cannot describe as anything other than a person, standing in the deep forest, looking directly at the camera from a distance too far to have noticed us on the path. Looking at me. Kira saw at the same time I did. She made a sound I have never heard her make before or since, a very small, involuntary sound, and put the phone face down on the table. Neither of us picked it up for a long time. I deleted the photo that night. I know you're not supposed to. I know you want documentation. I couldn't keep it. Every time I looked at it, the exhaustion got worse and the name calling at night got more frequent. And I had read enough by then to understand that a photograph taken in Aokigahara could function as a kind of connection, a thread, something that the forest could follow back. I deleted it and the name calling stopped. That's the first time I can point to something specific and say there was a change. But the exhaustion didn't stop. Felix still won't sleep in my bedroom 18 months later. I still wake up some mornings feeling like the night cost me more than sleep can give back. My weight stabilized but never fully recovered. I found the Buddhist priest through a Japanese community center in Portland. He is a serious man who did not dismiss what I told him. He burned incense, he said specific prayers, he gave me things to do at home. It has helped. Whatever came back with me from that forest, it's quieter now, less present. Some nights I sleep all the way through and wake up feeling like myself. But here's the part I want to leave you with, the part that matters most to me now. Before all of this, I was a skeptic. Not aggressive about it, not the kind of person who argues with believers. Just someone who lived in a world where things like this didn't happen, where there was always a rational explanation, where the boundary between the living and everything else was fixed and solid and not something you could accidentally cross on a nature trail in Japan. I don't live in that world anymore. What I know now is that there are places that have histories so heavy that the weight accumulates in the ground, in the trees, in the air between the branches. And when you walk through them, some of that weight can attach to you. Not because you did anything wrong, not because you deserved it, just because you were there and you were warm, and warmth is exactly what that kind of weight is looking for. I went to Aokigahara because it was beautiful and I had time to kill. I brought something home. I don't know its name. I don't know how long it will stay. The priest says it may never fully leave. He says some things, once attached, become part of you in ways that are very difficult to undo. He says the best you can do is learn to carry it. I'm still learning. In Chinese numerology, 4 is the number of death. The word for 4, si, sounds almost identical to the word for death, si. That's why you won't find a 4th floor in many Chinese buildings. No floor 4, no room 4, no unit 4. They skip straight from 3 to 5 the way Western buildings skip 13. The hotel I stayed at in Xi'an was old enough and Western-facing enough that they hadn't bothered with this. They had a 4th floor. They had a room 404. They put me in it. My name is Ryan. I'm a 36-year-old software engineer from Austin. I'd been in China for 8 days on a work trip combined with some personal travel. Xi'an was my last stop before Shanghai and the flight home, and I was tired in the bone-deep way you get at the end of 2 weeks of navigating a country where you don't speak the language and everything requires twice the effort. I checked into the hotel at 8 in the evening, got my key card, rode the elevator to 4, found my room at the end of the hall, room 404. I remember thinking briefly that the room number was funny. The programmer's joke, the web error code, page not found. I texted it to a colleague back home. He sent back a laugh emoji. I went inside. Nothing was wrong with the room. That's important to establish. It was a clean, modern, perfectly ordinary hotel room. Double bed, desk, flat screen, blackout curtains, a bathroom with good water pressure. Nothing to flag. I showered, I ordered room service, I called my wife. I went to sleep. I woke up at 2 a.m. because someone was in the room with me. Not a sound, not a movement. Just the absolute and immediate knowledge, before I had even fully surfaced from sleep, that I was not alone. That specific awareness, the one that has no rational explanation, the one that reaches you below thought. You know it when it happens. Your body knows it before you do. I lay completely still, eyes open in the dark. The room was quiet. The blackout curtains were doing their job, and it was almost completely dark. Just a thin strip of light under the bathroom door where I'd left the nightlight on. And then, from the far corner of the room, from the direction of the desk and the chair, I heard breathing. Not my breathing. Slower, more deliberate. The breathing of someone sitting very still in the dark, in a corner of a room that belonged to someone else. My hand found my phone on the nightstand before I had decided to reach for it. I turned on the flashlight. The corner was empty, but the chair at the desk had been moved. It had been facing the desk when I went to sleep. It was now facing the bed. Facing me, I sat up. I swept the flashlight around the whole room. Bathroom door open, empty inside. Closet open, empty. Under the bed, nothing. The main door was locked, the security bar across it, exactly as I'd left it. Nobody in the room. Nobody could have been in the room. I sat on the edge of the bed with the flashlight on and my back against the headboard and I waited. Nothing happened. After 20 minutes, I turned on the main overhead light and left it on. I did not sleep again. In the morning, I went down to the front desk and asked to change rooms. The woman at the desk, young, professional, good English, asked why. I said I hadn't slept well, that the room wasn't comfortable. A diplomatic lie. She looked at my key card. Something crossed her face. I want to be precise about what I saw because it lasted less than a second and it mattered. It wasn't surprise. It was recognition. The expression of someone who has just heard something expected. Something that fit a pattern she already knew. She said she would see what was available. She made a phone call in Mandarin. Then she gave me a new key card. 5th floor, she said. Much better view, I asked, as carefully as I could, whether other guests had requested to move from room 404. She was quiet for just a moment. Then she said that some guests found the fourth floor less comfortable, that it was a matter of personal preference, that the fifth floor would be much nicer. She said it all in the same pleasant, neutral tone, giving me absolutely nothing. That night, new room, fifth floor, I slept fine. The next morning, I was in the lobby waiting for my taxi to the train station when I got talking with another Western traveler, a British guy named Scott who'd been in Xi'an 3 days. We started comparing notes on the city the way travelers do, and at some point I mentioned the room change. His face did something. The same thing the woman at the desk had done, that quick, involuntary flash of recognition. He asked what room I'd been in. I told him 404. The corner was empty, but the chair at the desk had been moved. It had been facing the desk when I went to sleep. It was now facing the bed. Facing me, I sat up. I swept the flashlight around the whole room. Bathroom door open, empty inside. Closet open, empty. Under the bed, nothing. The main door was locked, the security bar across it, exactly as I'd left it. Nobody in the room. Nobody could have been in the room. I sat on the edge of the bed with the flashlight on and my back against the headboard, and I waited. Nothing happened. After 20 minutes, I turned on the main overhead light and left it on. I did not sleep again. In the morning, I went down to the front desk and asked to change rooms. The woman at the desk, young, professional, good English, asked why. I said I hadn't slept well, that the room wasn't comfortable. A diplomatic lie. She looked at my key card. Something crossed her face. I want to be precise about what I saw because it lasted less than a second and it mattered. It wasn't surprise. It was recognition. The expression of someone who has just heard something expected. Something that fit a pattern she already knew. She said she would see what was available. She made a phone call in Mandarin. Then she gave me a new key card. 5th floor, she said. Much better view, I asked, as carefully as I could, whether other guests had requested to move from room 404. She was quiet for just a moment. Then she said that some guests found the 4th floor less comfortable, that it was a matter of personal preference, that the 5th floor would be much nicer. She said it all in the same pleasant, neutral tone, giving me absolutely nothing. That night, new room, 5th floor, I slept fine. The next morning, I was in the lobby waiting for my taxi to the train station when I got talking with another Western traveler, a British guy named Scott who'd been in Xi'an 3 days. We started comparing notes on the city the way travelers do, and at some point I mentioned the room change. His face did something. The same thing the woman at the desk had done, that quick, involuntary flash of recognition. He asked what room I'd been in. I told him 404. He was quiet for a second. Then he said he'd heard about that room from a Chinese colleague who lived in Xi'an. He said the hotel was built on land that had been a hospital during the war, a specific period that he named, but I won't repeat here out of respect for people who know that history better than I do. He said the hospital had not been a good place, that many people had died there in ways that were not peaceful, that the land itself had a history that the building above it couldn't erase. He said his colleague had told him specifically that room 404 had a reputation in the city, that locals knew, that the hotel knew, that the staff had a quiet protocol for guests in that room who came down in the middle of the night or asked to be moved in the morning. I asked what the protocol was. He said, "Move them. Don't ask questions, don't explain, move them." I thought about the woman at the desk, her face when she saw my key card, the phone call in Mandarin, the smooth, practiced way she had handed me a new card with a better view. I thought about the chair that had been facing the desk when I went to sleep and was facing my bed when I turned on my flashlight at 2 in the morning. I thought about the breathing from the corner. I didn't say any of this to Scott. I just nodded and we talked about other things, and my taxi came and I left for the train station. I've thought about that chair every day since. Not with terror, not anymore. The terror faded in the way fear does when enough time passes. What replaced it is something quieter and harder to name. What I think about is this: whatever was in that room had been in that room for a long time. Long before the hotel was built there, long before the hospital, long before any of the things that happened on that land that I don't know the full extent of. And it had been patient, sitting in that corner in the dark, in room after room after room, across however many decades, waiting. Not for just anyone. The chair had been facing the desk when I went to sleep. It was facing me when I woke up. Whatever was in that room had taken the time to move it. It had turned its chair to look at me. And of all the things that happened in that room, that is the part that has never left me. Not the breathing, not the dark, not even the knowledge that I was alone with something that I couldn't see and couldn't name. The fact that it arranged itself to look at me. The fact that it wanted to see me while I slept. The fact that by the time I turned on the light, it was already gone. And I have never once been able to figure out whether gone meant it left, or whether gone just meant it didn't want to be seen.